All right. And welcome back, you guys, to the Self-Selecting Podcast. I am your host, Corey Hageman. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. As always, those of you who have rated, reviewed, subscribed, I appreciate it so much. I can see it in my analytics. I can see it when I go to look at what videos perform well, and I appreciate it. I'm glad that y'all are liking the content. And as always, if there is a topic that I haven't covered or something that you're just like, hey, you didn't really go as in depth or into this specific segment as I was hoping, can you redo it? Can you do it again? Please let me know. The comments is a great place for this because that largely is where I'm deriving a lot of I would say like my inspiration for content curation. So all that being said, links to services can be found in the description down below. Today, what are we talking about? This segment, this episode, this podcast is going to be geared towards how you should work out if you want bigger glutes. This is the most common physique goal that I see out there. Like, it's a very high ratio of women who come to me who frankly just want bigger glutes. And within that subset, there's a lot of women who are very systematic about like, I don't want legs, I don't want quads and hamstrings, whether they're competitors or not. And if you're someone who just wants a bigger butt, just wants more curve. And like, I get it. Like that even off stage, that's my goal. That's the kind of physique I want to have. I'm going to break down exactly how you should be training to see meaningful progress, to get the most out of your current program. And, hopefully by the end of this, you have some actionables, you have some things to kind of weigh against your current split. And if you are working with someone and they don't do your training, or you're just getting some like lame ass training split that's just like, yeah, I train to a failure and do a lot of hip thrust, get with me. That's not training coaching. What I do for my clients, I am like giving them specific exercises, specific modalities, specific target rep ranges, and there's reason behind it. Target working sets. I'm asking them for videos every single week, which like, I get it. I don't like filming in the gym either. I don't even think my gym allows filming. I'm pretty sure they're like one of those very like, point aside, I ask for training feedback because that is an opportunity to not just correct technique, but also to correct intensity, which this is going to be where we start off today. Number one thing that you need to do if you want bigger glutes is being intensity oriented. Oftentimes in the fitness space, in the fitness realm of like female weight training, high volume is noted as being like the key to sculpt and to tone and to put on the right muscle and the right kind of muscle in the right places. And look, like, it is true that there are countless examples of folks who have built great physiques, glutes included, using high volume approaches. But we also have to remember the following. We don't always know the full context. Some transformations you see can involve enhancements, and oftentimes they do, or different training histories. Now, the second thing, volume alone doesn't guarantee muscle growth. There is a synergy with intensity that you can't ignore. And I always say this, like, in lieu of intensity, volume will work only to a certain point. Volume can get really fussy and it can create problems down the road, particularly for physique athletes, particularly for athletes like myself who they lean into disassociation during a contest prep because, hey, that can be a great asset. High volume and poor recovery and high fatigue can put you in a position, like I found myself, where you suffer a major injury very close to a show, and albeit, like, sure, I could have pulled out, but then you have to compete injured. And that is ultimately what we want to avoid. We want to avoid having to regress our training, having to take steps back. I guess regress isn't really the right word, but what I mean is like actually take time off of training entirely. We want to avoid that. We want to avoid being in phases that frankly just don't accumulate to a lot of progress. And by progress in this case, we're talking about muscle growth. So when I say being intensity oriented, I'm specifically talking about proximity to failure. Now, if these terms are fuzzy, or if you're just unclear on what this means, or if you want a deeper explanation of progressive overload hypertrophy, I encourage you to check out one of my other episodes, it is specifically a video titled Training Terminology Made Easy. And in this video, I break down exactly what all these terms mean. So if you're kind of going through this, you're like, I don't know what the fuck she's talking about. Like, these are all very like nuanced terms. Cool. Go watch that. You can go through that, and that should be essentially a cheat sheet to break down common training terms you see and how to apply them, hopefully. Now, in a nutshell, proximity to failure means how close you get to the point where you physically can't complete another rep with good form. Now, there is a distinction that we need to make. There is muscular failure and there's technical failure. So I want you to think, if we're talking about a leg extension, like there's not a lot of technique there. There's not a lot of things that you have to like be mindful of compared to something like a hinge, a squat, where you can very easily turn this into an inefficient movement. You can very easily turn it into a movement that is loaded incorrectly or in a way that doesn't target the right muscle groups, and you can load it in a way, or you can position yourself in a way that can make it extremely ineffective for your goals and even put you at risk for injury. Now, when I'm talking about the squat and an RDL or a hinge type movement, a big component here is going to be pelvic stability, which we're going to go into later in this video. But understanding that like this is a movement where likely you're going to fail from a technical standpoint, meaning your core is likely going to fail prior to your glutes failing, your hamstrings failing, on account of the fact that it's very difficult to maintain the correct positioning. Whereas if we look at like leg extension, maybe a leg press, maybe an abduction, these are movements that aren't as technically challenging. They don't require the same kind of technical skill set. And realistically, you should be able to take yourself to muscular failure because you're not as concerned with maintaining the correct positioning as you would be with a compound movement. So understanding that if you're training and your goal is to reach a certain proximity to failure, so a certain distance away from true failure, it's important to understand if we're using technical failure or muscular failure to distinguish what failure that is. Now, if you're training 2 reps shy of failure, that means that you believe you're ending the set 2 reps shy of the point in which you wouldn't be able to continue to do any more reps. Now, from a technical standpoint, this could very well be you start to see that you can't maintain that core positioning. You're losing position. Now, in movements like a leg extension, abduction, these are movements that realistically you are going to get as close to muscular failure as you can get because there's not this risk of injury. There's no risk of taking yourself to muscular failure, assuming that you are truly loading musculature and not avascular tissue. Now, this is the way that I like to structure training, is identifying what proximity to failure we're getting to, or what proximity of failure that we're trying to achieve in a specific set. Now, without this key metric in place, proximity to failure, or i.e. intensity, this is something that can leave you doing a bunch of volume or a specified number of reps without really understanding how is this affecting my ability to grow. Now, this is how I see this play out. Typically, if someone is unclear or unaware about how close they are, their proximity to failure, they will get a program, they'll look at the target rep range and be like, okay, cool. I need to do, let's say, leg press for anywhere from 12 to 15 reps. And for simplicity, we'll just make this 12. And there isn't really cognition, awareness around what is the difference in the first 6 reps versus the final 6 reps. There isn't a consideration around what exertion looks like or whether or not a certain degree of exertion should dictate whether you should go up in weight or go down in weight. This is where I've seen a lot of progress in my own physique, is instead of going in just saying I'm going to complete a specified number of reps, I let intensity dictate how many reps I do and not the other way around. So this is largely dependent on the type of movement I'm doing. Compound versus isolation. And this is where what I was talking about regarding technical failure versus muscular failure comes into play. So for a movement that has a higher threshold, meaning you have to maintain positioning, and that is a requirement for you to complete the movement effectively and safely, this is going to be like a hinge, a squat pattern, maybe even like something dynamic like a walking lunge, we need to be really cognizant that the reps we're exposing ourselves to and the reps we're like putting in our program consider the likelihood in which we're going to fail technically. For these kinds of movements, ones that do require a lot of technical capability, I like to sit anywhere from 10 to 15 reps, but really leaning closer to 10 to 12 reps. For something that's more isolation based and doesn't have as high of a requirement from a technical standpoint, these are ones that very well could run it up 12 to 20 reps. But arbitrary of rep range, in both ranges, I'm focusing on getting as close to failure, either technical or muscular, not just completing the reps that are written on the program for the sake of checking the box that I completed them. So let's say I'm doing a movement like a bilateral RDL or a contralateral split squat. And the target rep range I like for these movements is typically 10 to 12 when I'm feeling fully recovered and feel like I can send it. Now, I will plan my weight that I'm going to use, the load that I'm going to use, so that I'm finishing a set at or near that failure zone. And this is often something that is depicted as I go through my warm-up sets relative to what I've been able to do in the past. So in the instance, let's say I pick a weight that is too light and finish all of the reps in the target rep range without ever getting close to the proximity to failure that I'm after, which for me, I like that to be RIR 1 to 2. This is an indication going into my next working set or my next set period that I should go up and weight. Assuming that technique is good, I'm not rushing through the reps, I don't have any room to slow it down without adding a tempo, this would be something that would allow me to essentially go into that next set and know that I can move more weight than the previous set. So I realize this is a little bit more advanced, and it does require to assess your working capacity regularly, as well as how close you are to true failure. But over time, this is something that I can tell you, if you learn, it'll make it a lot easier to make decisions within your training and also feel confident and reassured that there's nothing more you could be doing to yield progress. Bottom line, don't let volume overshadow intensity. Yes, there are some times where you're not going to have the same output. And in those cases, maybe you can constrain loadability by incorporating a unilateral movement, incorporating a tempo, or reorganizing the workout entirely. But realistically, if building bigger glutes is your primary goal, I would largely get good at understanding proximity to failure and bettering this skill set in real time. All right, number 2. Commit to the monotony. Embrace the suck. And let me explain what I mean. I see a lot of individuals on social media, typically influencers or fitness enthusiasts, fitness personalities, who will come up with various banded variations, complicated combos or setups, or new glute hack moves. And don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong inherently with looking at your training and trying to improve generally the enjoyment and like feeling excited about the movements that you're doing. But oftentimes I think this chase of novelty and chase of the next best thing can force you to end up turning a squat into an RDL, into a donkey kickback, all in one set, which means you're basically doing like 3 mediocre movements at once instead of one good movement with really strong focus. And that's really what we want to avoid. Is trying to gamify the system and come up with all these variations of movements that realistically are not ones that we can effectively load. And sure, you might feel a pump, you might feel a burn, but sensation doesn't inherently equal hypertrophy. And sometimes the best glute building exercises are the tried and true patterns. So think hinges, so RDLs, these can be unilateral as well. Squat patterns, largely with bilateral squats, you're going to be able to mask discrepancies in hip function, which is something that I think specifically for the competitor is something we need to pay closer attention to relative to how we're developing their physique. And then using isolation to really fill in the gaps. So this can be things like glute bridges. This can be things like hip thrust, cable kickbacks, machine abductions. But the big movements that I've seen in my physique that have led to the most progression is largely going to be hinges and squat patterns, alongside a healthy amount of abduction. And the reality is, a ton of glute growth can come from just systematically improving your performance on each of these movements. And indirectly, yes, that can mean adding weight and getting stronger. That can also mean improving your technique. But I can tell you, if you're always chasing novelty, if you are trying to add bands to make everything feel like a better burn, or combining moves in weird ways that frankly undo any kind of effectiveness of the original movement, you might just be chasing a bump instead of really putting yourself in a position to adequately progress load. My advice, don't keep reinventing the wheel. Use the fundamentals, they work for a reason, and keep progressive overload in mind, and trust that your glutes will respond. And this can be a slow process, especially for non-enhanced athletes, but they will respond if you apply enough tension over time and if you create an environment where you're able to build. And number 3, getting really good at pelvic stability. So this was something for me that made a big difference out the gate. When I started working with Jordan, he's like, okay, you've been able to progress a lot of these movements that are correct in your program. They're implemented correctly. But one of the bottlenecks that we were seeing was that I wasn't able to stabilize in the pelvis. So as I was going back into an RDL, what I was finding is that I didn't have the stability and I wasn't able to maintain the correct core positioning, even under load that technically, I could force and I could make work, but this wasn't allowing me to recruit my glutes to their fullest potential. Meaning that I was doing RDLs and I was moving a good amount of weight, but realistically, I wasn't making them as effective as they could have been. One of the biggest issues I see is this lack of synergy between the ribcage and the pelvis. And for me, this really was something that was impeding my ability to continue to progress at movements like an RDL or a split squat. Now, ideally, in order to create max force production at the glutes, you want your rib cage stacked over your pelvis. You don't want your ribs flaring. You don't want to let your lower back begin to curve. You want a very neutral lumbar spine. And by aligning the rib cage and the pelvis, you can brace your core effectively. And then assuming that you begin to develop more stability there, this is going to allow your glutes to handle more of that load. Now, this can also reduce these energy leaks, meaning you won't collapse in your midsection, which ultimately is going to sap force from these target muscles, making it hard to consistently see progress and continue to load them progressively over a long horizon. So it's important to understand the glutes are hip extensors, and for them to do their best job, your hips should move from a flexed to an extended position under control. Now, if your lower back is hyperextending, instead, you might just be pivoting at the spine rather than flexing and extending at the hips. Now, this kills glute engagement and might aggravate your lower back. So before a squat or a hinge, and really any of your lower body movements in which you are biasing your glutes, I want you to think about stacking your ribs over your pelvis. Think about creating that rib depression, so breathing down instead of flaring out. A movement that I really like that I found to be really helpful in building that pelvic stability is the 90-90 curl up. This is definitely one that I've used myself and with clients who are feeling their lower back more than they'd like to. It's an isometric and can be used intermittently throughout your workout, but if you're watching training footage of yourself and you see your lower back arching excessively or those ribs flaring up, even in a hip thrust, this is a sign that you're not stable. And I want you to think about it almost like you are now disjointed and you're not able to transfer force as efficiently. And the fix is practicing it under load, going into your exercises, making sure that even on your warm-up sets, you're getting really good at the skill of stabilizing at the pelvis. Number 4, segment out enough time. Yes, 12, 20 weeks, even longer for real growth. And this is a crucial piece. Glute growth, it doesn't happen overnight. And I've worked with a lot of people at this point who come to me and they say, you know what, I want to go through an intentional build. I want to make progress. I want to add inches to my glutes. Yet, once we get started, they find that they're discouraged that within those first few weeks, they're not seeing inches on their measurements. And realistically, this isn't a fun conversation, but it's definitely an important one. Most people are in a hurry and they want progress faster than it's going to come. And this is also going to be the case for individuals that want to maintain super lean physiques while also building. It's generally not realistic. You do need to eat enough, and often a slight surplus or at least maintenance is enough to at least fuel hypertrophy. But that can be scary for a lot of people. And I do want to respect that like the fear of losing your super shredded look or your abs, that can be a hard pill to swallow. But I can tell you that if you're in the game of like, I want to build massive glutes, I want them to have a lot of projection, and I don't want to keep finding myself at the end of a fat loss phase feeling like I'm lacking glute depth or glute projection, then accept you're probably not going to love the look at your peak build as much as you do at your leanest. And that's okay. I think providing consistent progressive overload for 3 to 4 months and making sure that you're doing everything within that time to ensure you can get the most out of this phase. And I can tell you with my build, like I did not want to accept the fact that I was going to have to get over 145. And for those of you who are new to the channel or new to following this, I was able to put 4 inches on my glutes this last build with just TRT in place. And for me, as more of a seasoned athlete or an athlete who has been training for a decent amount of time, this was really meaningful progress for a 16-week build. The reality is building muscle is going to require a different kind of hard than a fat loss phase does. And it's one and the same. And if you get good at really biting the bullet, embracing the suck of the build, you're going to be in a much better place for it, and you're going to be much more mentally resilient. But if you want more glutes, you got to see the scale weight go up. You got to commit to it. It's going to go too slow. It's going to be at a pace that you feel is really anxiety inducing, more than likely. It's very rare that people come to me and that we go through builds. They're like, yeah, this is happening faster than I thought it would. It just doesn't work like that. Number 5, get strong. And a lot of athletes will be like, well, I'm not a power lifter. I don't care about maxing out. I don't care about 1 rep max or being super strong. Yes, I hear you. But in my experience, there is a consistent correlation between building muscle and progressively increasing your performance in key lifts. And trust me, this doesn't mean that you have to do a squat, bench, deadlift. It doesn't mean that you have to chase 1 rep max in strength, but it can be more about doing more reps at the same weight, perfecting the technique so the same weight feels easier and more controlled, even smoothly adding load over weeks or months. But the key here, the thing that I think is going to give you some reassurance through this very slow, monotonous process is that strength improvements usually indicate you're adapting both neuromuscularly and via muscle tissue increases. And if your glutes are truly growing, you'll likely see that reflected in how effectively you can handle previous weights across all of your movements. Listen, I get it. We're not competing in powerlifting, but systematically seeing your working weights climb from, let's say on an RDL, 80 pounds to 100 to 120 for the same rep range, that indicates muscle growth is happening. Now, for some movements, we're not going to be able to progress load nearly as quickly. And that's okay, because even if the load, the weight you're using doesn't jump, ensuring you move the same weight with better technique, so more tension and less flailing around or compensation, this is a big clue that you're improving. And each rep is more effective for hypertrophy. So to recap, the things that you need to have in place and you should have in place if you're trying to build bigger glutes: be intensity oriented. Don't just rely on sheer volume, use volume appropriately, but get close to failure in a smart rep range that makes sense for the movement itself, and push those sets with real effort. Number 2, commit to monotony. Embrace consistent foundational movements. And it doesn't mean that you have to hate your workout or that you have to find it really boring, but the biggest bang for your buck is going to be hinges, squat patterns, and isolation movements. You don't need a lot of these fancy movements or these intricate gimmicky workouts or exercises that people are promoting online. Largely, they're not going to be as effective. Number 3, pelvic stability. Align your ribcage with your pelvis for proper force transfer. Don't cheat your glutes by overextending your lower back. Don't injure yourself. Number 4, give it time. Yes, 12 to 20 weeks minimum. And if you're looking to make significant changes to your physique, if you're looking to add 5 to 10 pounds of muscle in your glutes, this is not going to happen in 4 to 6 weeks. It's not going to happen in between shows. You need a dedicated building season. You need enough calories. You need consistent training, and you need an environment hormonally that supports muscle growth. And number 5, get strong. track your performance, aim to add weights or reps over time, or simply move the same weight better. But I can tell you, oftentimes the thing that is missing from someone who is seemingly doing everything right is they're not training hard enough, they're not getting strong enough. And I can tell you, strength correlates so much with muscular development. So this approach, it's not necessarily glamorous, and it's not the only way that you can go about building glutes. It does require a lot of discipline and willingness to do the same big lifts over and over again, and a tolerance for being in a slight surplus or maintenance for an extended period of time. But if you want bigger glutes, this is how I did it. You guys, if you enjoyed this episode, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments below. As always, I will see you in the next one.